Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ice Cold Takes podcast. I'm your host, Joey DeMeglio, and the Rangers continue to play better in January as they have earned points in 6 out of 7 games in 2025. Joining me today to discuss their play of late is Peter Baugh from The Athletic, who is currently on the road covering the team in Utah. Peter, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. And I am indeed in Salt Lake. I can see the mountains from my hotel room. And yeah, here I'm happy to be here.
So you've been covering the Rangers for a little while now, not quite a year just yet, but how have you enjoyed covering them so far?
Yeah, it's been a fun transition in my career. I covered the Avalanche for 3 years before that, and then last December moved over to New York, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been a good time. I get to do a little bit of Devils and Islanders too, but mostly have been focused on the Rangers and have enjoyed it a lot. It's been certainly a lot of travel and a lot of interesting storylines and ups and downs, but New York is an awesome place to live, and I've enjoyed it.
Make sure you listen and pay attention to what Vince Mercogliano has to say about food. Listen to him and him only. Don't listen to Johnny.
Okay, all right, good to know.
um, you covered the Avalanche when they won the Stanley Cup in 2022. So, what's one thing that team had which put them over the top that the Rangers currently lack?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, frankly, there are a few things. The biggest difference is, I think you look at the explosiveness of that forward group. Um, they just had their top six was so good of McKinnon, Rantanen. Nichushkin was playing at such a high level that entire season. Landeskog was healthy and playing well. Arturi Lehkonen was a great deadline pickup. And then Nazem Kadri had like an 87-point season that year. So it was just an extremely high level of talent in the top six, complemented by depth. And I think the Rangers, their forward group is not in the same kind of tier as that, or as some of the other top teams in the league currently.
Is there any sort of quality you see that the Rangers might share with that championship team? I know you said the forwards are not nearly the same, and that's true. But is there anything else that stands out from your time covering the Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've got this actually isn't necessarily something that they shared. The Avs kind of had okay goaltending and not great goaltending. But the Rangers have an elite goaltender, especially Igor Shesterkin in the playoffs has been consistently among the best playoff performers in the league. I think that if you look at like kind of the checklist of what teams need to win Stanley Cups, the Rangers have an elite defenseman in Adam Fox. Cale Makar obviously was an elite defenseman for the Avalanche. I think Makar has kind of separated himself from Fox in terms of like where he is in the league rankings and where you would evaluate him as a player. But Fox, I think, is still good enough to be the number one defenseman on a really, really good team, as he's shown in the past. And there's also at wing, like Artemi Panarin is an elite winger. The Avs had an elite winger, Mikko Rantanen. So I think you can see some spots where there's some at least similarities.
It's funny you bring up the Avalanche goaltending and how they had somewhat not as good goaltending as the Rangers, but the Rangers just played the Avalanche, and you could argue that Shesterkin cost them an extra point in that game. You know, he let up the tying goal in that one, and then the overtime goal. You could make a case that he could have had that one too. He kind of looked up into the sky. He felt
Yeah,
that he could have had that. What did you think about that game against the Avalanche? How the Rangers played in that one?
I thought they played pretty well. And I mean, Blackwood's been playing great for the Avalanche. He wasn't the goalie, obviously, when they won. But he's been a really good fit since he's gone over at the trade deadline and has played close to perfect, honestly. And was really good that night. I thought the Rangers had a good game. And I mean, Shesterkin was, maybe he makes one save that it maybe on a different night he makes one of those saves, but I didn't think he was like bad in that game necessarily. I think the Rangers generated a lot of offense and maybe just couldn't quite finish on as many chances as they needed to. I thought they controlled play a lot of it, and then I don't know, they allowed a goal at 6-on-5 against a team that has three probably top 20, maybe top 15 players in the world on the ice, and that happens sometimes. Like, you don't want it to happen, but it does. So I think that it was a good game for the Rangers. I just think that it's kind of, they're at a point in this season where they can't really afford to be letting points slip away, and that could end up being a big point. So could the one they kind of let slip away against Dallas a couple weeks or a week ago.
Yeah, they haven't played they haven't gotten to overtime too much, to start the season, so the points it's not like they're the Islanders where they could just keep racking up the loser point. That was how the Islanders got in last year, but, I mean, against the Avalanche, it was an unfortunate end. I thought the defense improved mightily. Since the ball dropped in 2025, that's my biggest takeaway so far in these 7 games. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I think it even might have started before New Year's. I think they lost those 2 games in Florida to Tampa Bay and the Panthers, but I thought they looked a lot better, especially at 5-on-5 against the Lightning. They allowed, I think, like 4 goals on special teams. They allowed 2 shorties and 2 power play goals. But at special teams, they played them, or at 5-on-5, they played the Lightning very well. And the same with the Panthers. So I think that the defense has clearly tightened up. They're playing way better than they did in that, I guess it was 4-15, that stretch of games they had where they had a 4-15 record. So I think there's certainly like positives to take from kind of where they're at. Um, will it be enough to get into the playoffs? I don't know. Will it be enough to change how they approach the deadline? I also don't know, but it's it's better hockey, and that's, I think, encouraging for just people watching the games.
Speaking of that Tampa Bay game you brought up, I've noticed that since that game, that was the game Sam Carrick took 3 penalties in that one. Ever since then, he's been unbelievable. He's been a really, really good center iceman for the Rangers. Can you talk a little bit about how he's improved his play from that moment?
Yeah, I don't know about from that moment specifically, but he's been great in the last, I would say, 5-6 games. I think he does. I think his teammates appreciate him because he takes care of a lot of the dirty work of um, shorthanded shifts, starting in the defensive zone instead of the offensive zone. He's not playing with the flashiest line mates, and he's not the flashiest player himself, but plays with a lot of. He plays with some physicality and an edge, and now he's getting the puck to go for him a little bit. He had the breakaway last game where he had the shorthanded goal. Obviously, the overtime winner was a big highlight for him. So it's been a really good stretch of games for Sam Carrick, and I think this is exactly what the Rangers wanted when they signed him. They wanted an affordable against the salary cap fourth line center who could be reliable, play good defense, and chip in some offense occasionally. And he's done that, and he's only making $1 million a year. So it's been a good fit.
Good replacement for Barclay Goodrow. It's worked out pretty well for the Rangers. And as far as, uplifting the team, there was a bunch of questions earlier in the season, at least last month, about how the Rangers were reacting to the trade rumors and all that stuff going around in the news. Can you say definitively, has something changed truly in that dressing room since the new year?
I don't know. I think maybe it's just settled down a little. Like I think it was a very, I mean, with the trade memo in November, like that understandably was a big shock to a lot of players, and I think threw a wrench in kind of the dressing room and had guys on edge, and I don't think that's entirely gone away. Like I think that's still going to be there a little bit, but I think that maybe things have stabilized a bit and they've gotten back to a point where they're playing the type of hockey that maybe isn't, like, they might not go 4-1-2 in every 7 game stretch the rest of the year, but they're playing well enough that they can like be proud of the effort. And I think it's kind of a feedback loop of like you get a couple of wins, the vibe starts to pick up a little better, a little more, and they kind of broke the cycle that they were in of these like really tough losses where they weren't even getting a single point, oftentimes against not very good teams. And now they're kind of in a bit better of a spot where now they've stabilized a little. So I don't know if like there's been an exact moment where things shifted, but I think things have stabilized to an extent.
I would agree with that. It's not like in previous years where there's, the one moment you could point to, like the Trouba helmet throw a couple years ago, or Connor Mackey dropping the gloves against Ottawa. It's kind of been. I agree with you, Peter, about how it's been kind of just going along with the flow since the end of December, the start of the new year in January here. It's the Rangers have really brought the fight back into their game. Which is a it's a good thing for fans because the losses were so they were so, like, non-competitive, um, like, they lost by a good amount of games, and they weren't playing particularly good teams. So it's interesting that they're playing better against stiffer opponents. Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first half of the year, they barely had any wins against playoff level teams. And now they're starting to, like you said, they've stabilized. They're playing well against good competition. And before the break, they lost to the Blackhawks. They lost to the Predators. They lost to the Blues twice. Like, they almost lost to the Canadians. Like, well, although the Canadians now are in a playoff spot, so that's
Mhm.
not necessarily maybe that was a better win than we realized at the time.
Yeah.
They've they have started to bring it against better competition, and even against Florida when they lost on, I think, December 30th. Like, I thought they played a really good, honest game, and they played a good game at 5-on-5 against Tampa Bay. So there's certainly some promising signs of how they're playing.
It's pretty funny to like the games against Florida, like the one at MSG towards the beginning of the year. The Rangers start off, what was it, 5-0-1, and then they play Florida at the Garden. I think from that game to the next time they played Florida at the end of December, that was bookending the rough stretch the Rangers were on. And ever
Yeah,
since then,
y-
it feels like everything's flipped around. Not to the level as the 5-0-1 start, but the
yeah.
game has picked up a lot.
And I mean, I would say even after that Florida game, they started 12-6-1. So
Yeah.
they still are over 500 for a little stretch there after that Florida game. But yeah, the play has looked better. Defensively, they've been more steady and solid, and I think can at least like feel. I mean, I think they were really upset after that Colorado game because they were in it, they had it. But I think they can at least like start walking away from these games feeling like, all right, we're playing decent hockey.
Yeah, it's been at the start of the season, it was all, like, a couple lingering questions that, were preventing the Rangers from getting over the hump. Can they get the 3rd line going? Can Zibanejad produce at 5-on-5? And that one in particular has, really come back into observation here under the microscope because Kreider and Zibanejad have been split up even after Kreider's return from injury. Do you suspect this will be the case long term?
I don't know. I mean, they've been split up in the past and have kind of worked their way back onto the same line. I think the fact is that Mika Zibanejad has looked a lot better since the holiday break. And I think that it's in the Rangers' best interest to do whatever they can to keep him at that level rather than the way he was playing the first 40 games of the year, however long it was. So the if that line with Cooley, Zibanejad, Smith is generating, I don't necessarily know if they switch it up. And Kreider also is like he just came back, so maybe not as many minutes in his first game back. And he also there's still questions about like he missed time earlier this year with a back injury. This latest injury, the team didn't specify what it was, but it was upper body. So is the back still bugging him? Like we don't know all of these things, and he um we'll see kind of like you said if they split them up or keep them together, but they tend to like they've split them up before, and so I think that this is nothing new, and we'll just have to see.
They never get the results though when they split them up. But when they put them together, it's been a long topic of discussion in amongst the Rangers fan base is should the Rangers split up Kreider and Zibanejad? And because they really haven't had any answers ever since they traded Pavel Buchnevich, and, I mean, now you put Cooley up there who looks really effective, and it's a small sample size, but Cooley, Zibanejad, and Smith have been a really effective 5-on-5 line for the Rangers, and they've only played 3 games, I think yes, 3 games, the Devils, the, Golden Knights, and then against the Avalanche, and they were all positive. All those games were positive. They've been their best line, and then of course the Panarin line has picked up their game a little bit. Um, but did Laviolette and the coaching staff finally act on Kreider and Zibanejad's ineffectiveness from the first half of the season with that move, or did this happen only because Kreider was injured?
I mean, they've split them up earlier in the year before. Like I think at a certain point, like the coaching staff just changes stuff up when things aren't working and goes cold. So I think maybe the Kreider injury gave them an opportunity to try something new, but it's not. He is Laviolette has split them up in the past before, and So it's not anything new. And I mean, I think that like you mentioned that kind of their results, like maybe Kreider and Zibanejad at 5-on-5, like after Buchnevich like wasn't the best line, but like Zibanejad still put up a lot of even strength points in 21, 22, even in 20. Like he was more than a point per game player in 22, 23. So, and a lot of those are at even strength. So I think that you're right that like there maybe was always more in the tank than like than they were showing, but there has been a drastic downcrease in the last couple years. Like it's the line was still working a little bit without Buchnevich, and then these last 2 years it's really taken a downturn, and this year in particular has been rough, and now they're I think reacting to it at least a little bit.
One thing I've noticed is that Zibanejad has the puck a whole lot more in 2025 than he did at the start of the season. I'm not I can't say for certain that it's because he has a better puck retriever on that line in Cooley than Kreider. What do you make of that? I mean, that's my takeaway from it. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think there's probably some level of like a puck retriever in Cooley, but I mean, I think he was with Kreider earlier in the year before, like earlier in 2025 before the injury. I don't think that Zibanejad's increased play is solely because he's not with Kreider anymore. I think he's just like looks like a more looks a little more like himself. I can't specify exactly what reason, but I think probably some of it is like starting to see some results builds your confidence a little, and he
Mhm,
probably has benefited from that.
mhm. How do you think, Kaliev has looked so far? Is he still dealing with an injury too?
No, I don't think he's dealing with an injury, but I think he's probably dealing with a little bit of rust. Like these are the first NHL games he's played all season. He didn't play a single NHL game for LA. He got a few minor league games for LA's AHL affiliate on a conditioning stint. So I think he's working through the rust. I think you see some flashes. He had a really nice shot on Blackwood last game that Blackwood had to make a good save on. Um, I don't think that line was great against Colorado. I think they were on for some chances against. It wasn't their best night, but that was a lot of players of like Heedle's first game back in the lineup after missing some time, Kreider's first game back after missing some time, Kaliev still rusty from not having played much this season.
Mhm.
So I think that there's not enough of a sample size to give a huge breakdown of Kaliev's game. I thought it was a smart pickup though. Just you might as well take a flyer on a guy and see what you can unlock if anything.
Do you know if Brett Berard is, possibly gonna come back up once they finish this road trip? Because I know they called up Bo Groove because of center depth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I don't think that they don't want Berard in the lineup, or they don't want Berard up with the Rangers if he's not going to be in the lineup. He's got to play. He's got to, whether it's in the AHL or in the NHL, he's got to get games in. So I think that from the Rangers' perspective, if he wasn't going to be in the lineup this road trip, it didn't make sense to bring him along. And I don't think they would call him up on the homestand if he's just going to be watching from the press box. They want him to get games in. And he had look, he had a like there was a lot of promise in his first stint, but he made some rookie mistakes, and that's okay. And I think it was they probably wanted him to get a little more seasoning. So I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we see Berard again at some point this year. I don't know if it's going to be right after they get back from this road trip, but you never know. Injuries will happen, and they'll probably have him up at some point. But I thought he had a he showed that he could be an NHL player at some point
He
during
does.
this kind of 15-game cameo he had.
Yeah, he was definitely impactful in that 50 in those 15 games, very noticeable. But a couple more questions for you before we wrap it up. Do you think the Rangers can recover from their early season struggles and make the playoffs?
I mean, I think they can make the playoffs. I don't know. I don't believe, as currently constructed, this team could go on a super long playoff run. I just don't know if they stack up well enough against other rosters. I also don't know if like we're gonna have to see what the roster looks like after the trade deadline, whether they try to move on from some pieces to kind of whether they move on from some pieces to try and recoup some draft picks that they've traded away in recent years. And um, I don't know. I think they can. If I were to guess today, I would say I probably would. have them on the outside looking in, but I think honestly the next week or so will tell a lot because they play both Columbus and Montreal. If you beat both of those in regulation, you're picking up 2 points on each of those teams that you're chasing, and you're suddenly looking a lot better in the standings.
The race is a lot tighter than I thought after, the new year. I thought the Rangers were well out of it, but it's actually pretty close. Seeing Montreal and Columbus of all teams who weren't expected to be there is, really hammering home that point, and it's not over yet. So there's still a lot of games to be played. But the trade deadline, perfect segue into our final topic. It's the ice cold take segment. I have a little definition for it, Peter. I read it every episode, so here's your little introduction to it. The ice cold take is an accurate statement backed by facts and observations that is solid in nature, similar to a block of ice, i.e., a spot on claim. Still working on getting that submitted to Webster's dictionary. I have to get that in there.
Yeah.
But for this week, what do you think the Rangers should do at the trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a team. I wrote a little bit about it um, today about Chris Drury has kind of already made clear that he doesn't think that this team is good enough to go on a deep playoff run. If he thought they were, he wouldn't have sent out that trade memo in November. He wouldn't have traded the captain of the team. He wouldn't have traded Capo Caco. Like, he clearly wants to shake things up, and I don't think that this recent um, good stretch of good games is going to change his approach to like how he wants to handle the rest of the season, especially considering the team was in a good spot when he sent out the original trade memo. They were 12-6-1. Like, they were playing, I mean, they weren't playing well, but they were at that point had good results. So I my guess, I don't know what I would do. It's not I don't have to worry about it. Like, it's not my job, but I think based on how Chris Drury has approached the season so far, I would guess they still try to like get some pieces back for players, maybe Brian Lindgren, maybe Riley Smith, maybe Jimmy Vesey if a team wants him. And I still think that it's possible that those guys kind of move at the deadline.
We've seen other GMs use their cap space to acquire mid-round picks. Would Drury be willing to do the same? And they have all three retention spots. So if you're doing like you said, shipping off guys that are going to be unrestricted free agents, might as well retain salary. He's also
Yeah.
traded away a lot of picks that, for rentals at previous deadlines. So maybe recoup some assets.
Yeah, I think that's I would definitely look into that. I mentioned that in my article today of like, if you can retain and get an extra fourth or fifth round pick, like, that's valuable. You can either use the pick for some organizational depth, or you can trade it and get maybe a bottom six forward or something over the summer. Like, there's picks have many uses, and I think that if you can find a way to get a few extra, whether it's by retaining picks or retaining salary, or operating as a third party broker when another team makes a trade and needs someone else to help out, like, I think that's would be wise for the Rangers to look into that.
They still looking at a core altering move like Alex Tuck or JT Miller, or should I
I
even
mean,
say it, Brady Kachuk? Or am I going to get in trouble if I say that still?
well, I mean, I don't know why Ottawa would trade Brady Kachuk, but
Of course.
I think I think that this, I mean, again, clearly, like, Chris Drury doesn't think his actions have shown that he doesn't think that this core is good enough. So I don't know what they're going to be able to pull off. Like, it's easy to say they should make a big move. It's harder to do it in practice. Like, their salary cap restraints, their trade restraints, like, you probably have to give up something you don't want to give up if you're going to get a big piece back. Like, it's easier said than done, but I would imagine the team will continue to explore big moves because, again, they've already kind of shown their hand of what they think of this team. They showed it at the beginning of the year.
Even if they burn through the rest of this month, winning like not every game, but going on a run, getting themselves back in playoff contention, you feel that they'll sell off assets.
I mean, I can't say for certain. Like, if they look like, if they start like having, if some of the underlying numbers start to look like among the best teams in the league, then maybe they'll reevaluate. Like, if they win every game, who knows? Like, that could change things. But all I know is based on the past is they were 12-6-1. They were, from the outside, a lot of people had them as one of the best teams in the league. They're coming off an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, had a 12-6-1 record, and Chris Drury told other GMs he was ready to make moves and shake up big name players on his roster. So if that's any indication, I don't think that they're going to be afraid to maybe recoup some assets. If we can talk again, if they go on a heater and win 10 in a row and suddenly are comfortably in the wild card and Zibanejad looks like a top 10 center in the league and all, like, there are all sorts of hypotheticals, but like my current prediction would be that they would still probably look to pick some assets back up. But we'll see. There's a long way until the deadline.
Yeah, it makes sense based on, what's going on this season, how this team has played everything out. So, I mean, going with that, it makes sense. Like I understand why you would feel that way. Um, but anyways, Peter, thanks so much for joining me for the episode. Really appreciate you taking time out. I know busy schedule. You guys do great work covering the team. I know it's a difficult field to be in, but you guys do great work. Really appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.